how to shield yourself from emotional manipulation, and the mental traps to avoid introduction. The silent thief. What if I told you that right now? Someone in your life might be stealing pieces of your soul, and you don't even know it's happening. Picture this. You walk away from a conversation feeling completely drained, but you can't put your finger on why. Your chest feels tight. Your mind is spinning. You're questioning everything you just said, everything you felt, maybe even everything you remember. Sound familiar? Emotional manipulation doesn't announce itself with dramatic entrances. It doesn't wave red flags or sound alarm bells. Instead, it whispers. It creeps in through your kindness, your empathy, your desire to be understood and loved. It's so subtle that by the time you realize what's happening, you're already wondering if you're losing your mind. That moment when you catch yourself thinking, wait, am I the crazy one here? That's not an accident. That's exactly what emotional manipulation is designed to do. It makes you question your own reality until you're no longer sure where your thoughts end and someone else's begins. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this silent thief. We're going to explore how to spot emotional manipulation and understand what happens inside your own mind when someone tries to bend your reality. Because the most dangerous part isn't always the person pulling the strings. It's the traps your own mind sets for you along the way. 1. Understanding emotional manipulation, the invisible web. Emotional manipulation isn't about being mean or obviously abusive. It often comes wrapped in what looks like care, concern, or even love. That's what makes it so incredibly dangerous. Emotional manipulation is psychological influence at its most insidious level. It's when someone uses your emotions, your empathy, your deepest human needs against you to gain control, power, or advantage. And they often do it without you having any idea it's happening. Think of it like walking through what seems like a beautiful garden. The flowers are gorgeous. The path seems clear, but with each step, invisible threads wrap around your ankles. You don't notice at first because you're distracted by the beauty. But slowly, those threads tighten. Your movement becomes restricted. Your choices become limited. By the time you realize you're trapped, those threads have become chains. Unlike obvious forms of abuse that scream at you, manipulation whispers. It doesn't force compliance. Instead, it gets you to second-guess yourself until you're the one doing the work for them. You become complicit in your own confusion. The manipulator plays on your most fundamental human needs, your need to be understood, your desire to be loved and accepted, your empathy for others, your fear of being alone or rejected. These aren't weaknesses. These are the beautiful parts of being human. But in the wrong hands, they become weapons used against you. 2. The manipulator's playbook. Common tactics exposed. Let's talk about the specific ways emotional manipulation shows up in your life. Gaslighting, the reality distortion field. This is systematically making you doubt your own memory, perception, and judgment. It sounds like, that never happened. You're being too sensitive. You're imagining things. I never said that. The manipulator acts so confident in their version of events that you start to question your own memory. Over time, you begin to doubt everything you think, feel, and remember. Guilt tripping. Weaponizing your kindness. This is where the manipulator uses your sense of responsibility and kindness against you. They make you feel guilty for having boundaries, for saying no, for prioritizing your own needs. It sounds like, after everything I've done for you, if you really cared about me, you would, love bombing, the emotional roller coaster. Someone overwhelms you with affection, praise, and attention to lower your defenses. It feels amazing at first, but once they've gained your trust and emotional dependence, they withdraw that affection. Suddenly, you're desperate to get back to those highs. The silent treatment. Emotional abandonment. This is punishment through emotional withdrawal. Instead of communicating openly, the manipulator becomes cold, distant, or completely ignores you. This triggers your deepest fears of abandonment and rejection. Projection. Flipping the script. The manipulator accuses you of feelings or behaviors they're actually guilty of themselves. If they're being controlling, they'll accuse you of being controlling. This creates confusion and puts you on the defensive. These tactics exploit your natural human desire to be understood, loved, and accepted. They turn your greatest strengths, your empathy and compassion, into vulnerabilities. 3. Why we fall for it. The psychology of vulnerability. Emotional manipulators don't create your vulnerabilities. They exploit the ones that are already there. This isn't about blame. This is about understanding the psychological terrain that makes manipulation possible. From birth, we're wired for connection. Our survival literally depended on being accepted by our caregivers. This wiring is still active in your brain today. As adults, we still crave approval, safety, love, and belonging. When these needs feel threatened, we become more pliable. The conflict avoidance trap. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that keeping the peace is more important than speaking the truth. Maybe you grew up where conflict was scary, where you learned that your job was to make everyone else comfortable. Manipulators can sense this. They know that if they can make confrontation uncomfortable enough, you'll choose to tolerate their behavior rather than face the discomfort of standing up for yourself. The self-doubt foundation. Most of us carry some form of insecurity. Maybe you doubt your worth, your judgment, your ability to handle difficult emotions. When someone subtly reinforces those existing doubts, it's easy to start trusting their version of reality over your own. The hope that keeps us stuck. You hope the person will change. You hope things will go back to how they were in the beginning. You focus on their potential rather than their patterns. You remember the good moments and convince yourself those represent the real person. Hope keeps you holding on long after logic tells you to let go. Understanding these vulnerabilities isn't about fixing them. These are part of what makes you human. The goal is awareness, so you can recognize when someone is exploiting these beautiful parts of you. 4. The inner battlefield. What happens to your mind? When emotional manipulation takes root, your mind becomes a battlefield where logic clashes with emotion, where intuition gets drowned out by self-doubt. This is cognitive dissonance. You're holding two conflicting truths. This person is hurting me, but they also care about me. I should leave, but maybe I'm overreacting. You're caught in an endless loop of second-guessing yourself. You analyze every conversation, every interaction. You wonder if you're remembering things correctly. You question whether your emotions are valid. This leads to self-gaslighting. The manipulator doesn't even need to twist the facts anymore because you're doing it for them. You silence your own thoughts and feelings before anyone else has to. The identity erosion. One of the most insidious effects is how manipulation slowly erodes your sense of self. At first, the changes were subtle. You hold back opinions to avoid conflict. You downplay your feelings to keep the peace. You second-guess your gut reactions. Little by little, the lines that define you begin to blur. Your values, your boundaries, your voice, they all adapt to survive the emotional terrain you're navigating. You become who you think you need to be to stay safe, to be loved, to be accepted. This creates what psychologists call a borrowed identity, a version of yourself molded by another person's control. You might find yourself asking, "Why don't I recognize myself anymore? Why can't I trust my own thoughts?" That's not a weakness. That's the natural effect of long-term emotional manipulation. It destabilizes your inner compass. But here's something crucial: that confusion you're feeling, that discomfort. It's not a sign that you're losing your mind. It's a sign that your deeper self is still trying to get your attention. Your authentic self is still in there, still fighting to be heard. 5. The mental traps that keep you stuck. Even after you start recognizing manipulation, your mind can still play tricks on you. Here are the specific mental traps that keep people stuck. The cognitive dissonance trap. When you hold two conflicting beliefs about someone, your mind tries to reduce the discomfort by finding ways to make both things true. Instead of accepting that someone can hurt you even if they care about you, your mind tries to justify or minimize the harm. The over-justification trap. You constantly explain away the other person's behavior. They had a difficult childhood. They're under stress. They didn't mean to hurt me. While empathy is important, over-justification becomes a trap when it consistently overrides your emotional truth. The self-doubt spiral. When you're told often enough that you're too sensitive or dramatic, you begin to internalize those labels. You stop trusting your own experience. You become afraid to speak up because you're not sure if you're right. The hope as bait trap. You hold on to good moments, believing they represent the real person. You think if you just love them enough, things will go back to how they were. But hope becomes a trap when it's based on potential rather than patterns. The sunk cost trap. You feel like you've already invested so much time and energy that walking away would mean it was all wasted. But staying in a harmful situation doesn't make your previous investment worthwhile. Recognizing these mental traps is the first step toward freedom. When you catch yourself in one of these patterns, pause and ask, is this thought helping me see clearly or keeping me stuck? 6. The turning point. Recognizing the pattern. Every journey out of emotional manipulation begins with a moment of clarity. It's usually quiet, subtle, like a whisper in your soul saying, "This isn't right." The shift happens when you stop looking at individual incidents and start seeing the pattern. It's no longer about one bad conversation. It's about recognizing the cycle. You start to notice that every disagreement follows the same script. Every boundary gets turned back on you. Every time you express feelings, you end up comforting them instead. This recognition is like turning on a light in a room you didn't know was dark. You begin to observe instead of absorb. Instead of automatically taking on their emotions, you start to step back and watch what's happening. When you can finally name what's happening to you, everything changes. This is gaslighting. This is guilt tripping. This is not my fault. This is not normal. Naming is power. When you can identify what's happening, you're no longer at its mercy. 7. Building your emotional shield. Practical protection strategies. Building an emotional shield isn't about becoming cold or closed off. It's about developing strong, flexible boundaries that keep you intact while still allowing you to love and connect authentically. Ground yourself in your values. Reconnect with what matters to you. When you're clear on your values, you're less likely to be pulled into someone else's version of reality. Write them down. Refer back when you feel lost. Rebuild your emotional boundaries. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about keeping you intact. If someone regularly dismisses your feelings or manipulates your emotions, it's necessary to limit your emotional availability to them. Question: emotional logic. Manipulators make you feel like their emotions are facts. Learn to pause and ask, is this true, or does it just feel true? Someone's anger doesn't necessarily mean you've been unfair. Someone's disappointment doesn't always mean you've failed them. Develop pattern recognition skills. Don't just listen to words. Watch for patterns. Do you always end up apologizing? Do you consistently feel confused after conversations? Manipulation thrives when you focus on individual incidents rather than overall patterns. Create reality anchors. When someone constantly questions your perceptions, you need external ways to stay grounded. Journal your experiences. Talk to trusted friends. Work with a therapist. Keep records of conversations. Trust your body's wisdom. Your body often knows before your mind does. Pay attention to physical cues like tension, stomach knots, headaches after certain conversations. These aren't coincidences, they're signals. Reclaim your voice. Gradually start small. Practice expressing opinions, saying no, or disagreeing when appropriate. You don't have to become confrontational. You just need to start taking up space again. A strong emotional shield isn't about fear. It's about clarity and self-respect. When you trust yourself, you become much harder to manipulate or control. 8. Reclaiming your identity. The journey back to yourself. If you've been in a manipulative relationship for a long time, rediscovering who you are underneath all the layers of adaptation is challenging but essential. It can feel like waking up in a house where most of the furniture isn't yours. The entire atmosphere was designed to suit them, not you. You look around and think, what do I actually like when their voice isn't in my head? The rediscovery process. Start by paying attention to your immediate, instinctive reactions. When choosing what to eat, where, or listen to, notice your first impulse before thinking about what someone else would approve of. These small moments of choice are where you reconnect with your authentic preferences. You might discover you love things they dismissed or enjoy activities they said were boring. Separating your voice from theirs. Learn to distinguish between your authentic thoughts and the internalized voice of the manipulator. When you catch yourself thinking their thoughts, pause and ask, is this really what I think, or what they trained me to think? Rebuilding your internal compass. Your intuition isn't gone. It's just buried under layers of self-doubt. As you practice trusting yourself in small ways, your internal compass will recalibrate. Start with low-stakes decisions and build up your confidence. Reconnecting with your dreams. What did you dream about before you learned to dream smaller? What goals did you abandon because someone convinced you they weren't worth pursuing? Part of reclaiming your identity is reconnecting with what you actually want from life. The journey back to yourself isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before someone else's expectations convinced you to be someone else. Your strength was always there. You are not here by accident. Some part of you knew you needed to hear this. That part of you that brought you here. That's your authentic self. That's your inner wisdom. That's your strength that never left. Emotional manipulation works by making you believe you can't trust your own judgment. But the fact that you're here, seeking understanding and healing, proves that your inner knowing was never fully silenced. You've always had the strength to recognize when something wasn't right. You've always had the wisdom to know when you deserved better. Now you have something more awareness. You understand the patterns. You know the tactics. You have tools to protect yourself. The manipulator's power came from your confusion. Your power comes from your clarity. You are not responsible for someone else's manipulation, but you are responsible for your own protection. The voice that whispers, "This isn't right," when someone crosses your boundaries. Trust it. The feeling that tells you something is off. Honor it. The part of you that knows you deserve better. Believe it. You have everything you need to shield yourself from manipulation and live an authentic life. You've always had it. Now you just know how to use it. Your strength was always there. Now it's time to let it shine.